Somewhere between what is real and what should never be remembered, there exists a place where stories are buried, not written in books, not spoken aloud, but passed from fear to fear. These stories were never meant for you. They were locked away, forgotten, sealed behind silence. Every voice you hear belongs to someone who listened too long. Tonight, you will hear what they heard, and once it enters your mind, it doesn't leave. This is your final warning. Welcome to the stories that watch you back.
Before the gas lamps, darkness was simple. It arrived without ceremony, settled without argument, and left no illusions about its purpose. When night fell over New York in the year 1809, people closed their shutters, lit their candles, and stayed indoors. The city slept because it had to. But progress does not ask permission. When the first gas lamps were erected along the main thoroughfares, the newspapers celebrated as if darkness itself had been conquered. Iron posts rose from cobblestone streets like sentinels, each crowned with glass and flame. Merchants extended their hours. Taverns overflowed with laughter well past midnight. Couples walked home beneath artificial stars. No one noticed how the shadows changed. I noticed because it was my job to notice. My name is Elias Crow, and I was employed by the city as a night recorder, an unglamorous title for an unpleasant task. While others slept, I wrote. Fires, accidents, unexplained disturbances, anything that occurred between sunset and sunrise that did not fit neatly into daylight understanding. Most nights were dull, until the lamps began to whisper. It was early autumn when the city completed its first major installation of gas lighting near the docks. Fog rolled in from the East River, thick and clinging, turning familiar streets into half-remembered dreams. I sat at my desk, pen scratching across paper, recording a minor disturbance involving a drunken sailor and a broken window. Outside, the gas lamps flickered gently, their light diffused into halos by the fog. At 12 minutes past midnight, every lamp on Dock Street flickered at once. Not violently, not extinguishing, they leaned.
That is the only word that fits. The flames bent inward, their glow narrowing as if focused on something unseen beneath them. I felt pressure behind my eyes, a sensation like standing too close to a great heat. Then came the sound, not heard, but received. The city is hungry. My pen slipped. Ink spilled across the page, spreading like a living thing before soaking into the paper. I stood, heart pounding, and approached the window. A man stood beneath the nearest lamp. He was tall, unnaturally so, and dressed in a long coat the color of old bruises. Fog curled around him but never touched his boots. His face remained obscured, yet I knew without seeing that he was watching me. His shadow stretched along the brick wall behind him, upward against the direction of the light. The man raised his head slightly and smiled without a mouth. I staggered back from the window. When I looked again, he was gone. The lamp burned normally. By morning, 17 people were missing. The disappearances followed a pattern no one wanted to acknowledge. Each missing person had last been seen walking alone beneath gaslight. Each left behind shoes placed neatly beside the road as if removed with care. No blood, no struggle, no witnesses willing to speak openly. The city officials blamed river accidents, drunken wanderings, voluntary flight. But I read the night reports, and the night reports told a different story. One witness, a baker named Samuel Roth, claimed the lamps dimmed as a woman passed beneath them. Another swore he heard breathing from the alley walls. A child insisted the street had moved when she wasn't looking. All statements were dismissed, all reports were filed, and the lamps kept burning. 3 nights after the first whisper, I heard it again. Breathing, soft, rhythmic, close. It led me down a street I had walked 1,000 times, yet something was different. Halfway along the block, a narrow alley appeared where none should exist. It was not newly constructed, it was newly noticed. The gas lamps did not illuminate it properly. Light seemed reluctant to enter, bending inward as if pulled by weight rather than shadow. I stepped inside. The sound of the city faded instantly. No river, no footsteps, no wind, only breathing. Halfway down the alley, I realized the walls were closer than before. Brick pressed inward, subtly but undeniably. The air grew warm, damp, alive. I placed my hand against the wall. It pulsed. That was when footsteps echoed behind me. I turned. The alley stretched far longer than it had moments before. The entrance was gone. The city had folded itself shut. Something moved beneath the bricks and whispered my name. I do not remember escaping. I remember standing once more on Dock Street, heart racing, breath shallow. The gas lamp above me burned steady, unbothered. My watch patch still read 12:12 a.m., the same minute. The city had rewound itself. By dawn, I convinced myself exhaustion had finally claimed me, that my mind, steeped too long in darkness, had turned against a constable with pale eyes and trembling hands. He would not meet my gaze. "It was found on a dock worker who collapsed near the river," he said. "No wounds, no cause." The parchment was old, stained, and warm to the touch. At first glance, it appeared to be a map of New York. At second glance, it was not. Streets bent unnaturally, alleys branched and rejoined like veins. Entire blocks were scratched out and redrawn elsewhere. And along the bottom, written repeatedly in different hands, "It moves when you're not looking." When I laid my official city map beside it, my own felt obsolete. That night, I watched as the ink shifted. The first building to change was Tenement 9B. Residents reported whispers from the walls, children speaking to empty corners, rooms growing smaller overnight. I arrived just before midnight. The building leaned. Inside, the air was thick, heavy, warm. A woman met me on the second floor, clutching her son close. "They talk to him," she whispered, "through the walls." I knelt beside the boy's bed and pressed my ear to the brick.
At first, silence. Then, he hears us. The wall twitched, the boy smiled, and somewhere deep within the building, something inhaled. He appeared beneath the lamp as if summoned by my fear, tall, faceless, watching. "You record the night," he said, without moving his mouth. "I record what happens," I replied. "No," he corrected gently. "You record what the city allows to be remembered." The lamps dimmed. She is awaking, brick by brick, name by name. "What is she?" I asked. "She is the city, and she is hungry." When the lamps relit, he was gone, but his shadow remained, burned permanently into the wall. From that night on, New York breathed, not metaphorically, audibly. Walls exhaled, streets pulsed, gas lamps flickered like eyes adjusting to darkness. People vanished more frequently, entire rooms disappeared, doors opened onto brick. The city was not expanding, it was digesting, and it knew me. I could feel it watching through windows, through walls, through the ink on my pages. At midnight, every lamp flickered, and the city whispered my name. I understood then what no one else would admit. The gas lamps had not brought light. They had given the city awareness, eyes, and with awareness came hunger. New York was awake, and it would never sleep again.
For several nights after the whispering man vanished, midnight behaved itself. The gas lamps flickered, but they did not lean. The streets breathed softly, but not loudly enough to draw attention. People still vanished, but in ones and twos rather than dozens. The city seemed cautious, watching, waiting. I made the mistake of believing this was restraint. What it truly was recognition. On the fourth night, my pocket watch failed. At precisely 12 minutes past midnight, it did not reset. It continued ticking. I stood at my window, watching Dock Street drown in fog. A man passed beneath the nearest lamp, his footsteps echoing too slowly, as if time itself hesitated to move with him. The lamp dimmed, not fully, just enough to notice. Then another, then another. One by one, the lights acknowledged him, acknowledged me. The city had learned how to keep time, and it had decided I was worth remembering. The map no longer waited for darkness. By afternoon, the ink shifted like slow worms beneath the parchment. Streets thickened, alleys narrowed, whole blocks drifted, their names smearing and reforming. I pressed my finger to the paper. It was warm. That night, I noticed something new. The map was not only changing shape, it was orienting itself toward me. No matter how I turned it, the same district always faced upward. Dock Street, Hester Street, Tenement 9B. My territory, my fault. When midnight arrived, the map pulsed once, hard enough to knock over my ink bottle. And somewhere in the city, a wall exhaled my name. I returned to the tenement at dusk. Children no longer played in the street. Windows were boarded shut, though no one could say who had done it. The gas lamps nearby burned dimmer than the rest of the city, as though conserving strength. Inside, the building groaned, not settling sounds, purposeful movement.
The woman from before met me again. She looked older, not by days, but by years. "He doesn't sleep," she whispered. "He listens." The boy sat on his bed, staring at the wall. When I approached, his head turned slowly. "They're learning your voice," he said. I froze. "I didn't teach him that," the mother sobbed. The wall bulged outward slightly, as if something pressed from within. Then it spoke. "Recorder." The lamps flickered. The building inhaled. I fled. The city no longer respected distance. A walk that should have taken 10 minutes stretched into an hour. Streets bent subtly, guiding footsteps toward Gaslight like veins leading to a heart.
I marked chalk symbols along my route. They vanished behind me. When I turned a corner near Pearl Street, I found myself back on Dock Street, again and again. The city was no longer rearranging itself randomly. It was guiding, training. He stood beneath the lamp as if summoned by repetition. This time, the fog recoiled from him. "You feel it now," he said. "You're feeding her," I replied. "Yes," he said, "but unwillingly. That is the richest nourishment." The lamp flickered violently. "Why me?" He tilted his head. "You write her memory. Without you, she forgets what she has eaten." My stomach dropped. "You are not prey," he continued. "You are the stomach." The street breathed. The entrance appeared where the bakery's oven once stood. Stone steps descended into warm darkness, lanterns glowing without flame. The walls were older than the city above, brick smoothed by countless passing hands. The breathing grew louder. Names echoed from the walls, hundreds, thousands. At the chamber's heart stood men and women dressed in dark coats, faces lit by ancient gas lamps. The Gaslight Society. They did not threaten me, they welcomed me. "She was blind before us," said their leader, "stone without thought. We gave her light," another added. "Awareness," a third whispered. They circled me slowly. The lamps were never meant to banish darkness. They were meant to give it eyes. I saw it then, etched into the walls. Maps, older versions, cities consumed and redrawn. The city did not expand, it replaced. They showed me what midnight truly meant. A chamber deep below the streets, gas lamps arranged in a circle, a man standing at the center. When the lamps dimmed, the walls moved, not inward, through him. He did not scream, he simply folded, brick replacing flesh, his outline absorbed into the structure. When the lamps brightened, the city had gained another room, another memory. At midnight, the lamps above went out, all of them. The city inhaled, buildings leaned, streets narrowed, walls flexed, and New York screamed, not in sound, but in pressure. The city was eating, and this time it did not reset. In the darkness, I felt it address me directly. "Remember."
and I knew then what my role truly was. I was not meant to escape. I was meant to survive, to write, to ensure the city never forgot itself.
Dawn came with a bruise-colored sky. From my window, the East River looked like black cloth stretched tight, refusing to shimmer. The fog did not lift, it thickened. It climbed into windows, under doors, into lungs. People walked the streets like sleepwalkers, their faces turned slightly upward, as if listening for something above the roofs. The night had not reset, it had continued. That single fact, so small, so ordinary for the world outside my cursed routine, shook me harder than any whisper from brick. For weeks, perhaps months, midnight had been the city's favorite lie, a moment that repeated until the city was satisfied. But last night, time had kept moving forward, which meant the city had learned a new trick, or decided it no longer needed old ones. I stepped outside with my notebook and felt the ground's subtle tremor, the slow muscular shift of something large rearranging itself beneath me. The cobblestones were warm, as if a furnace slept below. A woman stood on the opposite side of the street, staring at a lamppost. The lamp wasn't lit. The glass housing was empty, yet her eyes reflected a flame that wasn't there. "What are you looking at?" I asked. She blinked slowly, as if waking from a dream. "The street," she said. "It's shorter." I looked. The street was the same. Then I blinked, and it wasn't. The distance to the corner had reduced, subtly, impossibly, like a breath drawn in. The city was pulling itself inward. It spoke to me at noon, not at midnight, not through fog or gaslight or the hush of sleeping neighborhoods. Noon, when carts rattled, when vendors shouted, when life insisted it was safe. I was writing at my desk, recording the morning's reports, a missing dockhand, a mother who swore her kitchen door opened onto brick, a priest who fainted after hearing his own burial behind a wall. My ink paused in the middle of a word, because behind my eyes I heard it, clear and patient as a thought that wasn't mine. Recorder. My hand trembled. Then, "You will write what we become." I stood so fast the chair toppled. My heart hammered. Outside, the street was loud with ordinary life. Yet the moment the whisper came, every sound had dulled, like the world held its breath to listen. In the corner of my room, the shadow of my coat on the wall shifted, not with the light, with intention. The city had learned to whisper in daylight. By evening, the Gaslight Society's messenger arrived. He didn't knock. He stood in my doorway as if he had always been there, hat clutched tight, eyes flicking left and right like a hunted man's. "He's changing again," he said. "Where?" I asked. He swallowed. "Everywhere." He handed me a slip of paper. No map, no directions, just 3 words. "Come below now." And at the bottom, an oily stain shaped like a fingerprint. I knew that stain. It was the same blackish residue I'd seen near lamps that had leaned. The society no longer invited, they pleaded. The bakery's hidden steps were open wide like a mouth. Warm air rose from below, smelling of wet brick and old iron. As I descended,
The city above receded into muffled thumps, replaced by a deeper rhythm, a slow inhale, a slow exhale, like a beast asleep in a cellar. Lanterns along the tunnel walls glowed without flame. Their light was wrong, too steady, too watchful. Names were carved in the brick, hundreds of them, some scratched in desperate haste, others etched neatly like grave markers. I ran my fingers over one. The brick was not cold, it was skin warm. The tunnel widened into the society's chamber.
Expected robed calm, ritual certainty. Instead, the room buzzed with panic. Maps covered the floor like fallen leaves. Men argued. Women wept quietly. Someone had broken a lantern. Its glass lay scattered like ice, yet no flame had died. The leader, the one with flame-reflecting eyes, gripped the edge of a stone table so tightly his knuckles were white. "She isn't feeding in ones and twos anymore," he said. "She's reorganizing." A woman shoved a map toward me. "Look!" I knelt. The ink on the parchment moved, not drifting, flowing, like blood through veins. The map's streets pulsed, tightening toward a black point near the docks, near me. "She's building a mouth," I whispered. No one contradicted me. They took me deeper, past the chamber, into tunnels they had always refused to show me. Society business, they had said before. Old wards, old mistakes. Now they had no choice. We reached a corridor that hummed faintly. Gas lamps, older, heavier, lined the walls. Their gas casings were stained yellow, and behind them the flames didn't flicker like fire. They stared. We passed a door that shouldn't exist, an oak front door, complete with brass knob, placed in the middle of a brick hallway. The leader hesitated. "It appeared yesterday," he said. "What's behind it?" He did not answer. He turned the knob and pushed. A living room sat behind it, perfectly normal. A rug, a small table, a teapot still steaming, and a man seated in a chair, staring forward, motionless, eyes wide. The room smelled like dinner, like home, but the walls were brick, not interior plaster, brick. The man's lips moved. I stepped closer. He was whispering a name, not his own, mine. I backed away. The leader shut the door quickly, breathing hard. "She keeps them," he said. "She keeps the rooms whole, like specimens." "Why?" I asked. The leader stared at me, and for the first time I saw pure dread in him. "She's learning what people are, how they're arranged, how they're built. A city studying its citizens like anatomy, a stomach learning the shape of food." Further down, the corridor opened into a chamber with a single gas lamp hanging from a chain. The lamp's light didn't fill the room evenly. It pooled, thicker near the floor, thinner near the ceiling, like light had weight. A society member, a young man with trembling hands, pointed to a chalk mark on the wall. "We've measured," he said. "Time moves differently here." He tossed a coin into the pool of light. The coin fell, and fell, and fell. Not faster, not slower, just longer than it should. It struck the floor with a distant sound, like it had landed in a room far away. My pocket watch ticked in my hand, then ticked twice, then paused. "Sometimes," the young man whispered, "people come back older." "What do you mean, sometimes?" He swallowed hard. "Sometimes they don't come back at all, but we still hear them, somewhere in the walls." The leader touched the lamp chain.
It swayed gently. The shadows swayed with it, but a fraction of a second late, time lagging behind itself. The city was not only eating space, it was eating minutes. He was waiting for me above ground, not under fog, not under a leaning lamp. He stood in the open street at dusk, when passers-by should have seen him. They did not. Their eyes slid past him like he wasn't there, like he was a thought the city didn't permit them. His face was still smooth, still erased, but I sensed expression anyway, an amused patience, like a teacher waiting for a slow student to reach the lesson. "She's growing faster," I said. "She's dreaming," he replied. "Cities don't dream. This one does." His shadow sprawled across the stones, branching like a map. "She has tasted repetition," he continued.
Now she wants permanence. What does that mean? It means she wants to be the only place. A cold hollowness opened in my chest. You're telling me she'll consume other cities? He tilted his head. I'm telling you she has begun to imagine them. Behind him, a lamp flickered once, then twice, like a blink. She doesn't need the society anymore, I said. No, he agreed. They were the spark. She is the fire. I forced my voice steady. And you? He paused. I am what remains when the first piece is taken, he said. The outline, the echo. You were human. I was remembered, he corrected. Then I was used. The lamp behind him dimmed slightly. The society believes they can blind her, he continued. But when a thing learns sight, it fears darkness. And fear makes it hungry, I said. The whispering man's shadow twitched, pleased. Yes, he said softly. Now you understand. They called it a ritual, but it was really a negotiation, a bargain with a city that had stopped pretending to be stone. In the society's chamber, they arranged lamps in a circle, 12 of them, heavy iron, old glass, flames burning with a dull yellow that made faces look sick. The leader spoke quickly. We will extinguish them in sequence, break the circuit of awareness, remove her eyes. And if she resists? I asked. He hesitated. Then we contain the panic. You cannot contain a city, I said. His eyes flashed. We built her, we fed her, we will... The walls exhaled, a slow, irritated breath. The society members fell silent immediately. Even the bricks seemed to listen. The leader lowered his voice. We must try. Because the alternative was admitting they had created something that could not be uncreated. They handed me a ledger. You record the ritual, the leader said. Your words will anchor it. I stared at the blank page. You want me to make it real, I said. He didn't deny it. At midnight, they began. The first lamp went out with a soft sigh. Nothing happened. The second lamp went out. The air tightened like a hand closing around a throat. The third lamp went out. The walls pulsed, the bricks warmed, and I heard a sound from far above, carried through layers of stone, 1,000,000 gas flames flickering at once. The city was reacting. The fourth lamp went out. The chamber's shadows thickened, crawling outward like spilled ink. The fifth lamp. The flame resisted. It bent sideways as if pushed by wind that didn't exist. Then it went out anyway. The darkness surged.
A whisper rolled through the walls like a wave. "No!" The society members froze. The leader shouted, "Continue!" The sixth lamp went out, and the city screamed. Not in sound, in structure. The floor bucked, the walls flexed, the bricks shifted like muscles contracting. Above us, a distant rumble, buildings leaning, streets tightening, chimneys collapsing. The city was panicking because its eyes were being taken. I wrote quickly, my hand shaking. The city does not want to forget. The ink on my page glistened wetly. Then the words changed, not by my hand, by something else. The sentence became, "The city will not forget." My breath caught. The seventh lamp went out. The darkness moved like a living thing, and the walls began to close. The society did not vanish all at once. It happened in stages, like a room being remodeled around its occupants. A man near the circle stepped backward and struck the wall. The wall didn't yield. It softened. His elbow sunk into brick as if into warm clay. He gasped, tried to pull away. The brick held him, not violently, firmly, like a mouth holding food. His outline blurred, his coat, his shoulders, his head pressed into the wall. He didn't scream.
He whispered. "My wife," he said, eyes wide. "Tell her." And then his mouth was brick. A woman sobbed and ran for the corridor. The corridor was gone. It was brick now. The leader shouted, "Hold formation," but formation meant nothing against appetite. The lamps around us flickered, those still burning, like eyes darting nervously. The chamber breathed in. Bricks moved inward in slow waves, not collapsing, arranging. Rooms forming, doorways appearing, hallways knitting themselves together like stitches. The society members were being built into the architecture. Their bodies became corners, support beams, foundations. Their memories became layout. And in the center of it all, the city's whisper rose, satisfied. Mine. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped the ledger. Then the whispering man's voice, close to my ear though he was not there. "Right." I choked out. "What?" "Right, the boundary," he whispered. "Before she decides there isn't one." I ran, not toward safety, there was none, but toward a place that still resembled a path. The tunnels shifted as I moved. A hallway that opened seconds ago tightened behind me. A doorway that led forward turned into brick when I blinked. The city was building itself around me, not to trap me, to guide me. The map in my pocket pulsed with heat. I pulled it out while running. The ink surged toward a point ahead, a mouth. I rounded a corner and nearly collided with a wall that wasn't there a moment ago. I slid my palms against it, searching for cracks. The brick was warm. It breathed. I heard voices within, muffled, distant, like people calling from rooms deep inside a body. I pressed my ear close. A man's voice. "Please, I can't see the door." A child. "Mother?" The city kept them alive, not as mercy, as possession. I forced myself to keep moving, because the deeper I heard voices, the more the city seemed pleased. When I finally emerged above ground, the city felt taller. Buildings leaned inward like spectators. The air had that pressured heaviness of a storm about to break. And then it happened. Every gas lamp in sight ignited at once. Not brighter, higher. The flames stretched upward, thin and sharp,
like fingers reaching. Light climbed walls, raced across rooftops, joined into a single glowing lattice that pointed to the sky. People stopped mid-step, heads tilted upward, mouths opened. Clouds parted as if pushed aside. The stars above flickered, rearranged. Not slowly, not poetically, deliberately, as if responding to a signal. And in that instant, I understood the horror in its purest form. The city was not only awake, it was aware of the world beyond itself. It was looking outward, hunting outward. The street beneath my feet inhaled, and the entire skyline seemed to lean forward in anticipation. He stood beside me now, close enough that I felt cold where his presence interrupted the air. "She can imagine other cities now," he said. "How do I stop imagination?" I asked, voice raw. He turned his featureless face toward me. "You don't stop it," he said. "You shape it." "What are you saying?" "She is your recorder," he replied. "Your words are her spine." I looked down at my ledger, smeared with ink and dust. "She's already writing," I said. "Not well," he answered. "She writes with hunger. You write with meaning." A tremor rolled through the street. A window across the road shattered. People screamed and fled, but their routes changed mid-run, streets folding, corners tightening, guiding them back beneath lamps that watched. The whispering man's shadow spread toward my feet like spilled ink. "She needs a story," he said. "A story has limits. A story has an end. And if I give her an end, she will fear it," he said, "but she will accept it, because endings make things real." I swallowed hard. "A city that cannot imagine an end," he continued, "will never stop eating." That night, I did not record what happened. I wrote what must be true. I sat at my desk, candle burning low, and began to write with trembling certainty. I wrote that dawn arrives and the lamps dim, that streets return to their places in sunlight, that walls remain walls, that rooms remain rooms, that people belong to time, not to brick. Each sentence felt like pushing against something enormous. Outside, lamps flared, resisting. The city inhaled hard. The windows rattled. My ink trembled on the nib like it wanted to crawl away. I wrote anyway, and with each line, the breathing softened, not vanished, softened, as if the city, like a child, had been given a bedtime tale and, despite itself, was listening. At exactly 12 minutes past midnight, the nearest lamp flickered, then steadied, then slowly dimmed just a fraction. A small concession, a sign. The city was learning restraint, not through force, through narrative. By morning, the streets remained where they belonged. People stepped cautiously outside, whispering rumors. Some claimed the shaking had been a minor quake. Others insisted the gas lines were faulty. Only a few looked at the lamps with suspicion. Only I looked at them with pity, because I knew what the city had become. A thing that could dream, a thing that could hunger, a thing that could learn, and now a thing that could be told a story. I wrote every night after that, not just what happened, but what must continue happening for the city to remain a city and not become a mouth. I became the keeper of New York's bedtime. The whispering man appeared one last time, faint now, his edges thinning like smoke. "You've given her limits," he said. "For how long?" He paused. "For as long as you keep writing," he replied. "And when I can't?" His shadow pooled quietly at my feet. "Then she will write her own ending." And for the first time, I realized the greatest horror wasn't being eaten. It was being replaced.
The city did not thank me. Cities never do. They accept, adapt, and continue, grinding forward on the backs of those who keep them intact. New York was quieter after I gave it boundaries, but quiet did not mean peace. Quiet meant containment. Every night I felt the strain of it. The city pulled against the story I had written like a tide testing a dam. Streets held their places, but they wanted to move. Walls stayed solid, but they remembered how to soften. The gas lamps behaved, mostly. They dimmed at dawn, as I had written. They flared less violently at midnight. Yet sometimes when I passed beneath one alone, its flame leaned just a fraction toward me, like a child watching a parent, waiting to see if the rules would change. I wrote every night now, not as a recorder, but as a custodian. My ledger grew thick with corrections, reinforcements, gentle lies told in careful language, because lies, I had learned, are how civilizations survive. It began with small rebellions, a street that shortened by a foot, a window that opened onto fog instead of the expected room, a gas lamp that refused to dim until minutes after sunrise. Nothing dramatic, nothing that could not be explained away by fatigue, faulty construction, or bad weather. But I felt each deviation like a muscle twitch beneath skin. The city was probing the story, looking for weak sentences. One night as I wrote, my pen slowed. The ink thickened, resisting the nib, and behind my eyes the city spoke, not as a whisper, not as a hunger, but as something new, curious. "Is this the ending?" My breath caught. "No," I whispered aloud, though no one stood in the room with me. "This is the middle." The ink loosened. The pen moved again. The city accepted that answer, for now. They began to appear just after dusk, people who did not belong to the streets they walked. A woman wearing clothing decades out of fashion, staring in confusion at shop windows that sold things she did not recognize. A man who asked me for directions to a house that, according to city records, had been demolished before his birth. Their voices were quiet. Their eyes were wrong, not empty, but echoing. I followed one, a boy no older than 10, down an alley that should not have existed. When he turned to face me, his outline flickered like a reflection disturbed by water. "I got lost," he said simply. The room moved. I knelt before him, heart aching. "What room?" I asked. "The one with my bed," he replied. The walls got closer, then farther, then different. I knew then what the city was doing. It was leaking, rooms from within it, rooms it had kept, studied, memorized, were pressing outwards, trying to rejoin the surface. The city was testing whether it could grow without killing, whether it could rearrange instead of consume. That, perhaps, frightened me more than hunger ever had. I did not see him arrive. He simply stood in the corner of my room one evening, his presence bending the lamplight slightly inward. He was fainter now, less defined, as if the city's new order had less need of him.
"She's learning moderation," he said. "She's cheating," I replied. He inclined his head. "Cities always do." I continued. "She's letting rooms escape, letting people wander back out." "Yes," he agreed. "She wants to know if she can grow without killing."
I felt a chill. "And can she?" He paused for a long time before answering. "She can," he said finally. "But it will change her." "Into what?" "Into something closer to human," he said. "Or something far worse." I closed my ledger slowly. "And what happens to me?" His shadow thinned along the wall like drying ink. "You are part of the story now," he said. "Stories don't retire." One night, the map went still. For the first time since it had entered my possession, the ink froze in place. Streets held their shape. Alleys stopped twitching. The dark point near the docks faded. I should have felt relief. Instead, dread settled into my bones. A thing that stops moving is either finished or preparing to move at all once. I carried the map into the streets at midnight, passing beneath lamps that burned with careful obedience. At the docks, the water lay unnaturally flat, reflecting the city in perfect detail. Too perfect. The reflection did not ripple when I stepped closer. It did not match my movements. The city's reflection smiled before I did. The docks were wrong. Planks shifted beneath my feet, aligning themselves into patterns I recognized from the underground chambers. Gas lamps along the wharf leaned inward, their flames stretching toward a single point near the water's edge. The city was building again, not beneath, above. I felt it in the ground, brick and beam rearranging itself, corridors knitting themselves below my feet, not to trap me, but to support something. A structure without walls, a room without ceiling, a mouth that opened upward instead of inward. The city was learning a new way to feed, not by taking people, but by taking attention. The lamps flared brighter, the fog thinned. People gathered along the docks, drawn by curiosity rather than fear. That was the danger, hunger disguised as wonder. By midnight, hundreds had gathered, dock workers, shopkeepers, couples walking arm in arm, children perched on crates, eyes wide with excitement. They stared upward as the lamps brightened further, their light converging into a lattice that climbed into the sky. Stars flickered again, shifted, responded. The city was showing itself, not as a monster, as a marvel. I pushed through the crowd, shouting warnings that sounded hysterical even to my own ears. "Go home," I cried. "Don't look too long." Some laughed, some ignored me, some stared so intently I feared they might never blink again. The whispering man appeared beside me, barely visible now, like chalk fading from brick. "She's rewriting the ending," he said quietly. "Not if I stop her," I replied. He studied me. "You can't erase her imagination," he said, "only redirect it." I clutched my ledger. "Then I'll give her a better lie." I climbed onto a crate near the water's edge, lantern trembling in my hand, ledger open. The crowd murmured. Above us, the light pulsed. The city inhaled. I wrote faster than ever before. I wrote that limits felt like choices. I wrote that cities shine brightest because they end at their borders, that wonder fades when it becomes endless. That night exists so that day matter. Each sentence burned as I wrote it, the ink soaking deep into the page like it wanted to bleed through. The lamps flickered violently. The lattice in the sky wavered. People gasped. Some staggered back, suddenly dizzy, suddenly uncertain. The city resisted, not angrily, but stubbornly, like a child refusing sleep. I pressed on. I wrote that awe must be temporary, that mystery survives only when it retreats, that a city that shows everything becomes nothing. The city spoke again, not as hunger, not as curiosity, as frustration. Why must I stop? My hand shook. Because, I whispered as I wrote, if you never stop, you will be alone. The words hit the page hard. The ground shuddered. The lamps dimmed slightly. I felt the city hesitate, really hesitate, for the first time since it woke. Aloneness was something it understood. It had been alone before the lamps, before the streets, before the people. I leaned into that. I wrote that cities exist with people, not instead of them, that growth without restraint is erasure, that hunger without end is silence. The city exhaled. The lattice of light thinned. Stars slid back into familiar patterns. At 12 minutes past midnight, something extraordinary happened. The lamps dimmed. Not at dawn, not because I commanded it. They dimmed because the city chose to look inward instead of outward. The crowd stirred, confused, disappointed. Some complained that the show was over. Others felt a vague relief they could not explain. Fog rolled back in from the river, gentle now, obscuring the docks. The city's reflection in the water lost its smile. It matched me again. The whispering man stood beside me one last time. He was barely an outline now, a suggestion of posture and shadow. She has accepted the ending, he said. For now, I replied. He nodded. Endings are never permanent, only necessary. And you? I asked. He looked at his hands, if they could still be called that. He was her first memory, he said. Now I am no longer needed. Are you free? I asked. He considered the question. I am finished, he said. That is close enough. His shadow peeled away from the wall and dissolved into the lamplight. For the first time since the city woke, there was no outline left behind. Life returned, not perfectly, not completely. Some rooms never reappeared. Some people never returned from the city's interior. Certain streets still felt wrong if you walked them too late at night. But New York settled into itself again. A city, not a mouth. The gas lamps continued to burn, obedient but watchful. The fog returned to being merely fog, and I continued to write. Tonight, my hand aches. The ledger is nearly full. The city is quiet, too quiet perhaps, but breathing evenly. I know this peace is conditional. Cities grow, people forget, stories erode. One day someone will decide the lamps should burn brighter, longer, everywhere, and the city will remember what it felt like to look up. If that day comes, I hope these pages survive, because the most important lie I ever wrote, the one that saved us all, was this: that cities are only stone and street, not hunger, not dreams, not mouths. If you are reading this at midnight, beneath a lamp that seems just a little too attentive, look away, go home, and let the city sleep.
Before you go, look around the room for a moment. The story may have stopped here. If any of these stories stayed with you, you're not alone. Comment below the moment that made you pause, the part you can't stop thinking about, or the timestamp that felt too real. And if you don't want to face nights like this alone, subscribe now. New true horror stories every night, longer, darker, and closer to home. Turn off the lights, keep the volume low, and check your surroundings one last time. Good night.